We can start, right? He can walk by. He doesn't mind being in it,
Unless
right?
you don't want to hear the flush. How's business?
All right, so hello. I'm Michael Rattay. I'm here with DonAustin. This is the Braincast, where I meet and am meeting with business owners that I met via networking. So Don, give a pitch.
Okay. Well, I'm DonAustin, DA Services. I install security cameras on site for businesses and homes and commercial applications. And as you mentioned, we met through networking, which is vital to any self-employed business owner to propagate his business opportunities, get his or her name out on the street, and introduce their talent to the general public.
Is it because I wanted to say something about isolation, as just like as a way, as in general, at least for me, the way I found with networking is that it's everyone. I think so many people are afraid to get involved because you typically don't know anyone at these events.
Oh, correct, absolutely. I belong to a network group that I did not know anyone at when I first started, and have built wonderful relationships with those people. But that first, let's call it that, the first step from the time I heard about the group to the time I actually went, there was a lot of vacillating back and forth about whether or not I want to do this, whether or not it's going to be profitable for me, whether or not they're going to like me or like my product that I'm promoting. And so there's a lot of initial hesitance. And then of course there's doubt.
Right.
Is my business attractive to the people in the networking group, or am I going to get shunned? Which is kind of a very anxious feeling to have.
Yeah, especially you don't know these groups, and so it's like the kind of people that you're gonna approach, you really don't know what they're like. So, but even more, and on that vein, I think it's even more important because so many of the networking people that where you see them in one group and then you see people in other group, the reason I love networking people and groups is just they're like the most motivated of people.
Oh, exactly.
Which is, I think, is that like once you started going into these groups and you started meeting people, like, because you didn't go in to sell right away, right? I mean, I think that's the misconception where people are like, I'm going to go in and sell and close a ton of business.
Correct. Networking is not a sales pitch. Networking is a relationship builder. And if you go in with the attitude that I'm going to make 4 sales at this breakfast or this lunch or this after-hour event, then you're blind as to what networking is about. And those relationships that you get from networking really kind of tie in tangents, what are perceived in tangents, into your business. For example, I went to a networking group where it was there was a criminal lawyer. There was a financial planner. There was a lady who was selling beauty products, not Amway, but kind of like that kind of. She was she was a agent for a company, but
right.
She was a salesperson. None of those 3 people would be a fit to me from my perception. And they welcomed me. We built great relationships, and I've actually done some business for the criminal lawyer. So you can never say I'm going in and doing a sell, and I didn't do that work for the criminal lawyer after the first time I met him.
Right.
If you're going to network and you're going to promote your business and you're going to build relationships, you're planning on a 7 to 9 visit investment in that networking group. Now, once you get that first sale, never leave the networking group.
Right.
Because you're just turning the faucet on. And then more referrals are going to come, more business is going to come. And your networking group can be a very nice, steady flow of opportunity while you go out on the street and sell. Networking is not replacing selling. You still need to get up in the morning and flip through the phone book or Google numbers, and call people, and get your name on the street and do some print ad and do some social media promotion. That's your sales side. The networking side is really where you're building those relationships. And the beauty of that is when you get to a customer that you've been referred to through a networking group, there's inherent trust.
Yeah.
Which is wonderful.
Because it's their relationship. Whoever
Correct.
referred, yeah.
You and I build a relationship through networking. You do a service for a client. During that process, you find out that they could use security cameras, or they need to have low voltage wiring installed for whatever reason, and you say, I know someone, and they go, well, you did great work for me. If you know someone, I'm going to assume that they're going to be as good of a person as you are, so I feel better about that. And so you don't have that hesitance from customers like you do when you have cold calls.
Right. Stronger relationships, and makes
100%.
Because then there's already that, I think establishing the trust with random, cold calls and leads like that is the hardest part of that sale. So
Right.
giving someone the keys sort of thing is letting you in. I think one of the other things that really connected me about you when I heard, your financial background. I think we were both at Bank of America.
Yes.
Well, me right before Bank of America took over their mortgage company,
Right.
Countrywide. That's when I was there. And then I was totally enamored by the scuba diving thing. You've been doing, so what is the scuba diving?
Okay, so yes, I was a banker for 33 years, and I'm the trout in the stream of banking. I started with a very large bank, and which is the exact opposite of what a lot of people will do. They'll start with a smaller bank and then move from bank to bank and end up with a bigger bank.
Right.
I started with a big bank, and my career went the opposite way, and I went to small community banks, and which was a very interesting transition.
Yeah.
Because, well, there's a lot of things, and we won't get into that. But along with that, I have hobbies, and one of my hobbies is volunteering, particularly if you ask my wife. I volunteer to everything, to her dismay. And I have been a volunteer where I can practice my hobby of scuba diving. And I've been a scuba diver since 1988.
Wow.
So what is that, 30 years?
Yeah.
And I get to go scuba diving almost every Saturday morning in a nice controlled environment that lets me continue to do the things I love basically for free because I'm volunteering to do that.
Right. So how did the scuba diving relationship start?
Well, okay, I got married. I tell this story all the time, and I get a lot of frowns from my better half.
Of course.
Growing up as a kid, I kept fish. I was like one of these geeky kids that had fish tanks in his bedroom, under his bed, in his closet, in the dining room, wherever they would fit, and my parents kind of allowed me to do this. So I had fish tanks. When I got out of school and started living on my own, I had to give up fish tanks because a lot of landlords don't like having vessels of water that are going to break and flood their apartment buildings, right? So I kind of went into a little bit of fish remission.
Right.
And then I got engaged, got married, and my wife and I both worked downtown at the time. We both took the train to and from work together, and we would sit there and we would read the newspaper on the train because we had about a 45-minute commute, right? So we would read the paper in the morning, and whatever we didn't finish, we'd read it on the way back home.
Right.
Because you really can't talk on the train.
Right.
You know, the subway is too loud. There's a lot of outside noise. There's a lot of inside noise. So we would read. And about 6 months after we got married, we're going to work, and it's a Friday, and so there's the extra inserts in the newspaper. And in one of the inserts, which was like a social page, talked about volunteering opportunities in Chicago. And it was mostly focused on Lincoln Park Zoo. When I was in grade school, my political science teacher in junior high drove the zoo bus for Lincoln Park Zoo during the summer because as a teacher he had to do something in the summer.
Right.
And so I'm reading this article and I'm thinking about this junior high teacher. I'm going, I could do what he did. That'd be great. And so I'm looking at it, and I'm reading the article, and I get home, and the next Monday, I call Lincoln Park Zoo. And unfortunately, they said, well, at this point in time, we're only looking for folks who can help plant flowers and other plants around the zoo to help with our horticulture department. I'm not a flower guy. I wouldn't have minded driving the bus, but I'm not a flower guy.
Right.
So I went back to that article. We hadn't thrown the paper out, and I looked at the bottom. There's a footnote of other institutions in Chicago that use volunteers, and one of them was the Shedd Aquarium. And so I went and I said, I used to keep fish for a hobby when I was a kid growing up. What do your volunteers do? And their answer to me was, our volunteers do everything. I said, no, really, what do you do? And they said, no, you do everything. You can do water quality tests. You can help feed the animals. You can do food prep. We do guest services. Now, 30 years ago, the almost all institutions in the city of Chicago weren't as sophisticated as they are now.
Right.
So there was a point in time where I was a ticket taker for the aquarium, and you would purchase your ticket, and you'd walk in and you'd hand me the ticket, and I'd give you directions as to where to go. And now we have this whole counter system with computers and barcodes on your phone and things like that. But back in the day when it was simple, I used to take your ticket and then tell you where the exhibits were, where the bathrooms were, where the gift shop was.
Yeah.
One of the things they taught us right away was always point them to the gift shop.
Yeah.
Right? So after 3 years of doing that, I became a diver for the aquarium. And I
just like talking with people, like the whole time, just letting them know
talking
your
with
interest,
people,
or did it like pop in? Like,
I said I'd really love to start working with fish.
Gotcha.
And the Shedd Aquarium has a very extensive diver program. They use volunteers in almost every exhibit throughout the entire institution. They need a lot of help.
Oh, well, yeah, that's a ton.
So I took scuba lessons during my first year of volunteering, and then another 2 years went by before my name popped up on the diver list.
Wow.
I had to get obviously certified. I had to get experience, and then I had to go through presentation classes because they wouldn't want someone talking to the public while they're scuba diving and not have an idea of how to conduct all those things and still stay safe.
Yeah.
So there was a very extensive program that you went through, and I became a diver for the aquarium, and I've been doing it ever since. The best part about it is not the diving. The best part is talking with the guests who come to the aquarium after I've completed my dive, which is really funny because I've always thought it ironic, or absurd, I should say, that people want to talk to someone who's dripping wet.
Right. Well.
And yeah, you get a little cold, but the interaction warms you, so you don't notice that you're freezing cold. But you just sit there going, why? And kids want to hug me all the time. Why do you want to hug the wet guy? It doesn't make any sense. But guests are wonderful to interact with. You don't know where they're coming from. You don't know what their expectations are, and it's just a rewarding experience each and every time. And to bring it back to networking, it's like that first time you go into a networking group. You don't know about the group, you don't know about the individual persons, and you just build those relationships.
Right.
The difference is when I am doing my diving, I have literally 5 seconds to make a good impression and create a nice relationship for those guests. Networking, you have a little bit more time. You can let people know about you a little bit more.
You have more opportunities,
Correct.
but you still have that quick burst of...
And before you ask, no, I have never been bit.
Yeah, because you're in the main one?
I'm in the Caribbean Reef exhibit, which is the 90,000-gallon exhibit in the center of the aquarium building. There's different definitions of being bit. When a little 1.5-inch fish comes up and pulls the hair on the back of my hand or tries to nip the tip of my finger, that is not a bite, because he is no way in any capability able to create any harm to me. He lets me know that he's there,
right,
but he can't harm me. Larger animals, like the bonnet-head nurse sharks we used to have some barracudas, we have moray eels. Those types of animals could and would potentially bite someone. I have never been bitten by them. Knock on wood. But the Shedd Aquarium does a wonderful job training their divers on safety.
Right.
So we know how to approach the animals. We know how to present food to them. So they know that they're getting food and they're not going to eat your finger. And we do that most of the time while we're talking to the public, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. Sales on to the people and the fish.
Exactly. I speak multi-sale language.
So they're actually talking to you. I'm just really enamored by this, as people are clearly. So they just literally watch you in the tank, and then you come out like as you walk over, and then that's when they stop you.
Yes. And
That's fun.
this also sounds kind of counterintuitive, but you have to walk through a portion of the public area of the aquarium to get from behind the scenes where you get prepared and changed to do the dive to the exhibit,
Right.
And then the reverse at the end. Hardly anyone ever talks to me when I'm walking from behind the scenes to the exhibit, and I'm dry and I'm
Right.
happy and I'm comfortable. They always seem to wait until I get out of the water, and then there's a line to ask questions.
That's interesting.
It is. But it's fun. It's rewarding. As I said, I've been doing this for 30 years, diving for 30 years. I've been a volunteer at the aquarium for almost 33 years. That in itself is my testimony as to how great of an institution the Shedd Aquarium is.
You don't hear that for anywhere.
No.
For that long.
No.
Good for you. Financial to now, you just kind of, so I think we both left around the same, well, no, you left
I left earlier.
08,
I
didn't you
left-
say? 07?
I left banking in 08.
08.
Yeah. And financially, my financial career, quite frankly, the reason why I changed, and I know that you kind of had the same experience. 2008, we had that recession or that reset of our economy in America, and there was a different approach provided to banks by regulators for the most part. And banks, of course, needed to also re-establish themselves back into being a profitable business, because you only go into business to be profitable.
Right.
And so during that time, opportunities within the banking community were disappearing fairly quickly. And I was, as I had said earlier, I'm the trout going the wrong way up the stream. I went from a big bank to a small community bank, and a small community bank that I was in was taken over by a regional bank. And of course, when that happens, there's usually duplicity of positions, and there was a duplicate at my level,
Yeah.
and I was not on the winning side of that, so I came out of banking.
Yeah.
And I did a little bit of recruiting work for about 6 years after that, which is something I like doing as well. And then I decided, you know what, I should just be my own boss and do yet another thing I love doing, and that is growing my business and meeting with people and helping them answer a need that they have.
Finding the absolute problem, resolving it.
Exactly.
That was my biggest getting out of the financial industry, is just wanting to do like a true value prop exchange, just like, here's this, because with trading and banking, it was just, you're always the explainer and like apologizing, and
Right.
So it was like, let's just try a value prop that we can exchange. So I know those feelings.
Yep.
Video, so in surveillance, so you just enjoyed kind of tinkering. It was just the whole electronics thing that you went down, or do you ever do creative video stuff, or?
No. So 30 years of banking. I've worked in cash management. I've managed a cash vault. And anyone who's been in a bank knows that 24/7 there's a security camera over your head. And as a manager in a bank, it was my responsibility to review adverse actions that occurred in the bank through the video surveillance system. And as opposed to having a security officer, because banks started to stop using on-site security officers because of cost, it would fall usually to the manager in charge of the operations. And so I became the expert at finding images on the surveillance equipment, and also realizing as I'm doing this that whoever installed this for the bank didn't understand the workflow of the bank, and so cameras weren't always looking where they should be looking.
Right.
Right? And that really bothered me.
Yeah.
It was like, why can't we have someone who can look at the environment, discover what occurs in that environment, and address that in a proactive way? Make sure a camera's in the right place, make sure a camera is catching the important things that you need to capture, and make it efficient.
Right.
So and so taking those experiences and my philosophy of that in my business, I mostly tinkered with computer wires when PCs were up and coming. When I first started in the workforce, we had massive mainframe terminals, not PCs. And you had function keys, and you were very limited as to what you could do. And now you can launch the space shuttle with your smartphone, right? But in between, there's a lot of things that happen in the technology sector that are behind the scenes. One of them being low voltage wiring, and how wires, simple little wires, can carry things like important data or images or sound. Kind of interest me, and so I learned how that worked, and not the science of it, but more the code of it. So always use this color for this and that color for that, just like electricians do. So that little side interest, and then my intuitive perturbedness at security cameras in the bank, I decided I can do this, and I can be the guy who can proactively look at your environment and how you use that environment, and I can then give you a good, positive, proactive solution.
Yeah. That's like, well, I guess when you originally said that, it's like the engineers, so many different apps, like a lot of our trading apps were just designed by engineers that have never traded.
Exactly.
You know, and then it's like, well, no, it needs this function, but.
Exactly. Those techie engineer guys, I experienced those bumps and bruises all throughout my banking career. You know, a customer would make a deposit, and there was a check from the island of Guam, and there was just this default delay in giving that customer their funds, and it was because they didn't understand the check from Guam.
Right.
And the techie guy had no idea that Guam was even an island.
Right.
You know, and so you were missing these gaps, and so you're constantly doing workarounds. So.
That's hilarious, and so sad, because so many industries have it's like the blind leading, it's like the blind leading the people that can see. And you're like, wait a minute, isn't this the wrong way?
Yeah.
No, trust me. Okay, sure.
Exactly.
Those are so fish. So is there been your favorite scuba place, like vacation that you've spent a lot of time underwater that you love, or do you have something in your sights, or like where you want to go? And
in the early 90s, Cozumel was great. Cozumel and Cancun and the Playa Riviera had become so over touristy that unfortunately a lot of that beauty has been marred by tourists. Where I would like to go, and it's interesting, I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, I really want to go and do both a land and diving trip to Belize and Honduras and Costa Rica. Because one, I think the way that isthmus of our continent down in Central America has formed geologically, there's plenty of stories above the waterline to discover. And the way currents work in our world, they're on the right side of the landmass that is beautiful, clear diving with lots of fish and thriving life. So, and still, some of these geological wonders that have occurred. So I'd love to go down there. I'd love to spend, when I win the lottery, I'll be spending 3 months down there,
Right.
breathing air from a tank as opposed to air from outside,
Yeah.
and just discovering all these wonderful things down there. And I'll come back looking like a prune or something.
Yeah.
But
Did you ever
the
do
dream.
Lake Michigan then? Is there any scuba diving you do there? Or?
Being a born and raised Chicagoan, when you learn to scuba dive, I have two choices. You do your checkout dive, your final exam, either in a freshwater quarry or in Lake Michigan. That's your choices. And the Midwest, the upper Midwest around Chicago and northern Indiana have plenty of freshwater quarries because ironically we have a lot of limestone. And limestone is something that gets mined. And they're mining these quarry pits for limestone, and they get so far down and they hit an underground spring or hit the water table, and then it floods. Quarries are really neat because the business of mining doesn't care about the equipment.
Okay.
It's expensive equipment, and they use it, and it's valuable to them. But they're not going to launch a rescue mission for a front-end loader.
Oh, gotcha.
Or a hopper car, or things like that.
Right.
Excuse me. So when you dive in a quarry, you go down there, and there's a crane.
A bunch of
And
skeletons.
you could sit in the cab of the crane in scuba gear, and it's just the goofiest picture ever.
Yeah.
Right? And Lake Michigan, throughout its entire history that we've lived along the coastline of Lake Michigan, we've had a lot of maritime commerce. And a lot of people may or may not know this, but during World War II, Lake Chicago and Navy Pier were taken over by the Navy, the U.S. Navy, which is why it became called Navy Pier, because before that it was called Metropolitan Pier or something, or Municipal Pier. But the Navy took it over and used it to train aviators. In fact, our 41st president was a Navy-trained pilot off of Navy Pier here in Chicago. That's George H.W. Bush, right?
I don't know that.
And the beauty of that is it's a wonderful piece of history, and we know as a country how World War II turned out for us, and the fact that there were a lot of dogfights or air battles between airplanes during World War II that gets glorified in movies. It's kind of nice to know that the connection comes back to Chicago.
Right.
And it happened here. But the other nice thing about it is when you're training someone to do something, there tends to be a lot of accidents. So Navy pilots would learn to land on a flight deck of a boat, and it typically was a side paddle steamer that they took from like the Mississippi River and trucked up here and put a flat deck on it.
Right.
And basically trolled up and down Lake Michigan, and these planes would try to land, and they would go over.
Yeah.
Or they'd come short, and they would sink. There's a lot of little wreckages along the Evanston, Chicago, Gary, Indiana coastline.
Wow.
Because of all this activity that had gone on. And Lake Michigan is not terribly deep. Lake Michigan is really no more than 60 feet deep at the south end, so it's an easy dive.
That's it?
Yeah.
I keep wondering that because I've been getting out there to do some early morning footage, and so I've been spending a lot of time by the lake, and it's this whole new invigoration of me too, though.
And there's ironically, there's plenty of dive operators in the Chicago area that will take you out on a lake excursion. It's really cool. I like diving Lake Michigan. You have to understand weather, because right now we're sitting here on October 8th, and the air is getting cool, the leaves are starting to change, and we're thinking about winter jackets, and this is the exact right time to go diving in Lake Michigan because the water's warm. The water warms up over the summer.
Right.
And those trillions of gallons take a while to get warm.
Right.
So the water temperature right now is probably in the 70 to 72 range. And the air temperature is in, what were we this morning, 58?
Yeah.
Right? So you're thinking, oh, I'm not going to go diving. It's cold out. It's going to be warm underwater.
Right.
And it's clear.
Interesting.
Ironically, Lake Michigan is a very clear lake. So it's a great place to dive, and it's an easy dive.
You're going to intrigue me. I'm going to start looking into it.
You want to go diving, we'll go diving.
I only did scuba diving once, and it was just snorkeling. It wasn't even scuba diving, it was just snorkeling. So, cool. Well, see, that's very intriguing, and that's...
Well, I'm gonna pique your interest in diving even more.
Okay.
There is a wreck off the shoreline of Evanston. It's not off the coast, off the shoreline of Evanston. It sits in about 30 feet of water. So 30 feet of water is 3 atmospheres.
Okay.
10 feet of water, the pressure changes enough that you consider it an atmospheric change.
Okay.
Okay. So there is compression on your body, but not so much that you're breathing too much air, because the air in your tank is a gas that gets compressed as well, right? So the deeper you go, the less actual air you have because you're passing it through because it's all compressed.
Right.
Right. So 3 atmospheres, 30 feet, isn't that bad. You can be on a tank of air for about 45 minutes at that depth, especially in nice mild weather and you're not having to swim around a lot. So off the shoreline of Evanston, and it's not terribly far. If it's 1.5 miles off the coast, off the shoreline, the beachfront, I'd be surprised at that. Is a boat called the Wells Burt. The Wells Burt was a coal boat, so it would come to Chicago, load up with coal, and go across Lake Michigan to the Muskegon, Ludington area.
Okay.
And it would drop off Illinois coal for the northern part of Michigan to use over the winters, when they would use coal to heat their homes and stuff. On the flip side, the Wells Burt on its way back wouldn't come back empty. You never sail a ship empty, because it's a waste of money.
Yeah.
So they would carry logging back to Chicago. In fact, some of the logs that were used to build the sidewalks in the downtown Chicago area before the Chicago fire were made from logs that came back on the Wells Burt. But as the year would progress and it would get cold, the Wells Burt became known as the Christmas tree boat, because in November they would start bringing fresh cut pine trees from the upper part of Michigan on its return trip. And so that whole process is really kind of intriguing. And the Wells Burt is sitting upright. It's a totally wooden boat. It's massive broken off because they're kind of spindly, and so water currents will break them over time. But the deck is still stable. It is pointing a little bit northeast, northeast, and it's got still in its hold probably about half a load of coal.
Wow.
And you can just go down there and you can take a piece of coal if you want.
Souvenir.
But it's really kind of interesting. But the story behind the boat makes diving on that boat that much more interesting.
Right.
You know, the story of getting on a little Corsair A110 single pilot plane that's sitting in 45 feet of water, 1.5 miles east of the water intake cribs, knowing that one of our presidents was flying one of those planes, makes diving on that plane that much more fun.
Right.
You know.
So you've done that then. So you've gone. That's got to be. That camera's an underwater one. That's like the reason I'd want to go, is just film everything.
Yeah.
James Cameron style.
Yeah.
But that would be interesting.
Well,
I know a guy.
Get geared up. Let's go.
No, I know a guy. All right. Well.
Interestingly enough, I know you're more of a musician than I am as a hobby.
Yes.
I can carry a note if you wrote on a piece of paper and handed it to me. And I can read that note, but don't give me a scale of music, because I can't do that at all. And believe it or not, I'm envious of people who can do that. I took piano lessons as a kid. I couldn't play chopsticks.
Really?
Can't. Just not there.
Have you tried picking it up again? Or is it just been...
On and off. And as a parent, all of my kids, when they were in school, grade school, we made them pick a musical instrument and take lessons. My son is a percussionist. He still plays. He doesn't play for anything but fun.
Right.
And both of my daughters were horned musicians. So one was a saxophone, and the other was a clarinet.
So they got
a woodwind. Okay. So they did okay. We made them learn it because we wanted them to have a a different experience than just going to school and learning things from books and taking tests. We wanted them to have a different outlet. We also encourage them to do sports in school, because sporting programs are very important for younger kids. And we got them involved in group activities like scouting, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and things like that. But we never told our kids, you have to become a concert pianist. You have to become the highest ranking Girl Scout or a Boy Scout or the best basketball player. We wanted them to have those experiences and let those experiences settle in with them. So as I said, my son continues to be a percussionist whenever he walks into a place and there's,
drum sets
or things like that. And he's kind of self-taught himself piano, which is kind of great. My daughters, they like music, but they don't like playing it.
Yeah.
And so that's just how it goes. And I'm envious of the three of them because, again, I couldn't carry a note unless you wrote out a piece of paper and handed it to me.
Well, maybe that's not your instrument, Maybe bass is always a good starting point. Drum, I think drums are a good starting point, but so many people are like, well, the coordination, but everything could always, I don't know. It sounds like you just wanted people to get experience. I'm like your kids, just try it. Don't get too crazy over it. And that's where I think with music, you can just try so many different fun instruments that you may end up locking onto something. And it is, man, I spent so much time to try and get my coordination, before you're any good. Like, that's the other thing. It's just so much work to really get to have a talent in almost anything. I mean, that's just life.
I do have a bucket list, and one of the items at the top of my bucket list is to learn how to play guitar. I had it as a bucket list item to achieve at a certain age. I've passed that age, so I've taken the age off of it.
And just to learn it.
But before I'm done here, I want to learn how to play guitar.
I would, in parentheses next to that, I would suggest writing 3 songs. One to 3 songs that you want to learn to play, and then that could hopefully kind of roundabout way get you into practicing.
Right.
At least for me with drums, I was mostly self-taught, and it was because I would just play the music that I wanted to play, and that made practicing for me just so much easier and so much more fun.
Right.
And then it's such a shorter goal, because you can at least see the end game of like, okay, there's 8 chords, just learn the 8 chords, and then in the 3 minutes. That might be a way to trick yourself into slowly playing, a little bit of guitar.
Right.
That would be my musical suggestion.
I was at a street festival yesterday because we're in fall, so it was an Apple Fest.
You have to, yeah.
And it was a great little street fest, and they had a little gazebo on one of the side streets, and I think it was the Old Town School of Music, folk music, had some guys there, and they were playing guitar and doing songs, and they were old folk songs that I knew, and I'm like, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do.
Folk, dang. You took my easy suggestion into, because folk is like a lot harder, so that is a harder, it is a bigger thing.
Know that
But you could still learn the basics, and then you can start picking on it. And so.
I am enamored by guys who can sit there and strum a guitar, keeping chords, and sing into a microphone in front of people.
Yeah, that's a lot of practice.
And these 2 guys were doing it seamlessly, and there are a lot of little kids in front of their little stage of the gazebo, and they're like doing Irish dancing to their folk songs, and I'm just like, I'm not sure I get it, but I couldn't be that guy because I would be laughing at the kids and I'd get distracted, and these 2 guys were just seamless, and I adoringly watched them for a good 20 minutes as they went through their selections and stuff. And I said to my wife afterwards, I said, it's back at the top of the bucket list.
Good for you.
So.
Well, I'm glad it's on the top of the bucket list again, because I think that's, especially now, our life, I think modern society is all about reinvention.
Right.
And so just keep reinventing yourself. The majority of my social life is because of music. You know, it's just like that's where, you know, you go see the friends on Thursday night or you play the following week. And so I'm always, no matter how good or bad you are, I always encourage everyone to play.
Right.
So I hope you take it up.
Thanks.
So thank you. Thanks for sharing your story.
Anytime.
Again, this is one of my connections that we met via networking, and that's where you never know. Initially, we're kind of in the same field, both with video, but you don't really know where connections and where you can actually connect with people. But I think, you know, if you're open to new people, open to meeting people, that's where the new cool stuff actually happens.
I agree 100%.
So try new things.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.